Please try to settle down. We'll be starting the session, next session. Welcome back, everyone. We will now have the session titled Decarbonization of the Built Environment. Who will bell the cat? Today, we confront a critical component that lies at the heart of our collective efforts towards sustainability, decarbonizing the buildings and construction sector in our journey towards net zero. This session will delve into strategies and solutions aimed at achieving net zero and decarbonization in building sector, with a specific emphasis on scaling a factor for delivery, which implies a 75% reduction compared to the baseline. So I would like to invite to the dais our esteemed panelists. First, we have with us Mr. Manjunath MD, Head Life Cycle Solution, Carrier. Mr. Manjunath plays a pivotal role in spearheading the life cycle solution strategy and business initiatives across India and the South Asia Pacific region. Please, Mr. Manjunath. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Anurag Bajpai. With over 15 years of experience in the field of sustainable energy, renewable energy, and green technology, Mr. Anurag is a co-founder and director of Green Tree Global. Please, Mr. Anurag. I would also like to invite Ms. Millie Majumdar, Managing Director GBCI and Senior Vice President US GBC. She is the program lead for several programs, including lead for cities and communities, lead residential and peer. We also have with us Ms. Pratima Vashan, Independent Sustainability Advisor and Senior Expert AEEE. Ms. Pratima has worked with national and local governments, asset owners, developers, and financing institutions in Europe and Asia to help accelerate climate action. Finally, we have Mr. Philippe Coquille, Chief Development Officer. Mr. Philippe has been with NG before. He is the Chief Development Officer at Tabreed. He was with NG, the multinational utility with wide range of experience ranging from project management, finance, business development, and others. And the session chair and moderator for today's session is Dr. Prasad Vaidya, Director of Solar Decathlon India and Senior Advisor at AEEE. He is a lead fellow with 25+ years of experience in energy policy, program development, and net zero energy building projects in USA, Korea, the Middle East, and India on over 150 buildings. So welcome all panelists, and now I would like to hand over to Dr. Prasad.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone, or is it still afternoon? Please excuse the introduction. I don't have a doctorate, so I'm just Prasad Vaidya. But we'll go from there. Welcome, panelists. It's a difficult topic that we're going to deal with because the building sector is a difficult to abate sector, as we all know. And we also have a difficult topic to deal with here because we're being asked to bell the cat, and we have to identify who is going to bell the cat. So maybe first we should talk about what the cat is and what the bell is. So clearly the topic is decarbonization of buildings, so the cat is that. And when we say who, I want to define this in terms of strategies or technologies or approaches that might get us there, rather than an agency or a person who will bell the cat. Does that sound okay? All right, okay. So the building sector, especially in India, is going to be growing tremendously. We have estimates of about 800 million square meters that will grow every year. And that's going to result in added emissions of about 2 gigatons that's going to come from buildings. And that's an annual add. So if we look at what's going to happen with with decarbonization and what we need, that that it's a significant problem. So if you look at the projected emissions of India, that's about going to be 7 gigatons in 2050, and we're going to be adding, significantly to that through building. So the question is, how are we going to do it through decarbonization? And of course, we all know that that's going to come either from operational carbon reduction or embodied carbon reduction. So the conversation can be around that. But we also know that the world is going to go through an infrastructure revolution right now, and decarbonization is going to be one of the agents that will lead to that revolution. And the other two are digitization, deglobalization, that have been discussed. So it creates a huge opportunity for India, and for us, I think it gives us a way of discussing this in that context. For today's discussion, I also want to focus on this idea of 4x or factor 4. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us see small incremental changes in energy efficiency or decarbonization through various strategies. But the size of the problem that we are looking at really requires us to look at deep decarbonization strategies. And when I say 4x, that means that if it's efficiency, then we are talking of going from a 100% business as usual scenario to a 25% consumption or a 75% reduction. That's what 4x is. If we're talking of scaling up, then we're talking of scaling up in terms of 4 times. And if you're talking of, say, cooling, then how do we get to 4x efficiency for cooling systems? So that I want to keep the focus of the discussion related to that as we talk about it. So I think that might make it more interesting. And the challenge that I'm also going to give you as panelists is that we also need to be efficient in terms of time, but maybe not 4x. So we'll just keep it to maybe a little bit less. We've been given about an hour for this session, so let's try to keep the answers kind of crisp and to the point, and let's get started. So I think the first question that I'm going to start with Millie, you. So you've been involved now with Griha, and you started and set it up, and now you're with USGBC, and you've been working with rating systems. And when you've seen LEED now go through its various versions. So from your perspective of rating systems and buildings that are around the world as well as in India, where have you seen the 4x come through? Has it been through a certain type of rating system? Has it been a certain type of building that has been able to achieve it? Is it a certain type of client or a building owner that has been able to achieve it? Is it a technology that gets us there? And maybe you can differentiate between the projects that go through a typical rating system versus your LEED 0 rating system, which is actually aiming towards 0. And tell us just, where are you seeing significant differences happening in performance?
Thanks, and great to be here. So I think it's a very vast topic, and you have given a very big question. So I will kind of break it into a couple of sections. Firstly, as you rightly said that I have been involved in seeing the sector grow, and also seen how the efficiency, kind of dialogues have changed over the years. And typically speaking, you talk about Griha, LEED, or for that matter, any rating system. The core of that is also the embedded codes and standards that you leverage that and you want to go a step better. So how, even if you see, the genesis of any rating system and how they have evolved. So typically we see that a building constructed, say 30 years back to LEED, or for that matter any rating system standard, would be much more inefficient than the one. So which is not, the rating system is an aggregator of the best practices, but then the codes and standards as they evolve. And the codes and standards also have been able to evolve because technology has been, kind of progressed enough to allow codes and standards to incorporate them. So I do see a lot of role of, growing awareness around codes and standards that have enabled efficiency You talk about, kind of efficient lighting system, better insulation, better glass, better knowledge about integration of passive concepts. So all of these have been, great influencers in making that happen. And hence, rating systems also have driven better buildings. So the energy use intensities have progressively come down, and with renewable energy infusion, we have been able to kind of progressively move towards net zero. But what also we have seen, like recently, for example, we launched a state of decarbonization report in the United States, where we took a deeper look into the commercial real estate. There, it's very interesting find that in US, the commercial buildings, the energy use intensity have gone down typically for all office buildings, because we generalize buildings, when we say, and mostly we focus on commercial buildings. But then there is a particular segment of building which, while we were focusing on commercial real estate, that grew up without having too much focus. That is the manufacturing and the logistics sector, where we find there has been, whatever has been the savings in the commercial real estate has been nullified by maybe, warehouses, refrigerated warehouses, because of logistics. So I think that holistic view of decarbonization and which sector needs what focus, that needs to be there. So that's my, first take, that the discussion of on decarbonization is ever evolving, and technology certainly helps, and the integration and rating systems are great motivators for that. Now coming to the LEED Zero program, which specifically you talked about, there we do not talk about design stage efficiency. We only talk about certifying projects, buildings that are zero carbon or zero energy. There are multiple programs operationally. And there also one thing is very apparent, that the efficiency of the grid from which you draw the power, that also drives the zero conversation, and which means that you can maybe operationally you can not have a zero, but when you try to offset it, then the costs become very high. So there we do see a lot of challenge, and most of the buildings that get certified to say LEED Zero programs are not like large commercial real estate, so they may be smaller ones. And if you try to again offset it by measures of say buying carbon offsets, etc., that also has a very differential meaning in different countries, and particularly in India we find that there is no regulations or proper means by which you can also kind of put forward carbon offsets that is recognized, like Greenie certification, etc. So there are a lot of challenges around that, but certainly LEED Zero is a growing program, and we do see a lot of traction around that. So I'll take a pause here. And
but I want to give you a prompt here. And since we are in the context, talking in the context of energy efficiency related to decarbonization, do you see a certain type of building or certain type of rating level, rating system that gives us an EUI or an EPI that might be 1/4 of the average?
yeah, definitely, when you are adopting, see, most of the rating system, decarbonization has the maximum points, like the maximum core points go to energy efficiency and, achieving that. Then in LEED, the energy atmosphere credit, if you look at LEED for cities and communities, it is the energy GHG emissions. There, of course, we look at larger, city level frameworks. So there, definitely a project that is going for LEED Platinum, that would have the maximum level of, reduction in EUI. But, what, the point is that you can never, on the EUI side, you can never get to, beyond a certain point. How do you offset the balance?
Sure,
is
yeah,
also the
but
critical
you are
issue.
saying that
Yes.
projects that go for higher levels of rating,
definitely,
so you're seeing a correlation between
that, and
between
right
that.
now also what we are doing is, in the LEED version 5 that we are evolving, we are also expanding the scope of, emissions, that because we are being more inclusive of all scopes of emissions, trying to see how also embodied carbon gets, kind of into the entire dialogue, and how we make it a holistic, carbon conversation.
Great.
And in this respect, I am also seeing in the European Union, there are several other frameworks that are coming up looking at net zero buildings where not only you are looking at embodied operational, you are also looking at biogenic carbon, you know,
Okay.
on how. So things are evolving and a lot of.
Thanks. So a couple of takeaways from, I think, for related to this, from what you said. One is, I think you said that rating systems are bringing together the best practices. So we really need to have best practices that evolve so that rating systems themselves can go forward. That's good to understand, I think, for this audience. And the second thing is that the deeper the level of rating commitment that the building owners make towards the rating system, the more you're likely to see that change in efficiency levels. Great, thank you. So I'm going to follow this up with maybe Manjunath, you. You know, obviously cooling is an important issue, and you know that's what your business is dealing with. We are trying to reduce GHG emissions, as well as, you know, it's crucial in terms of adaptation. And in one sense, I'll just give you a metric saying that if we were to say that we can achieve baseline level cooling at 1 kW per ton, are you seeing technologies within your businesses, with your competitors, that are able to get us all the way down to, say, 0.25 kW per ton? Or in terms of COPs, if we were to talk about 3 as sort of the baseline, are we able to see technologies that are, you know, getting us all the way to up to 12? And you can even reflect on, you know, the global cooling price and what came out of it, what your competitors are doing, as well as what you guys are doing in the industry.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. So I don't have a direct answer. Can I just kind of give you a background, a little bit of background as to what we are doing globally, and then finally get the point that, you know, the question that you had asked. So 40% of the energy globally is on account of buildings, and 40% of that on account of HVAC, which roughly translates to about 22% in terms of GHG emissions. So HVAC has a huge play, especially in terms of operational emissions. So, you know, when we're looking at cooling solutions, we have got a lot of things going on. With the Carrier, globally, we have committed to the SBTi lower than 1.5 degree centigrade pathway. And part of that, actually, we've got near-term and long-term goals. The near-term goal being by 2030, we're going to have our emissions reduced by 50%, by about 50% from the 2015 baseline. And by 2050, we're going to be net zero. So here is where I want to introduce this. You know, you spoke about gigatons of emissions coming into play. So we have taken a pledge that we're going to reduce 1 gigaton of emissions for our customers by 2030. Now, I'll tell you why. When we looked at our inventory buckets, the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions of Carrier, so we have scope 1 and 2, which is direct and indirect emissions, which is pretty much under control. Now, scope 3 emissions, which is actually the value chain emissions, you know, both that comes from upstream, from our supply chain management, and downstream from the use of our products and solutions, is close to about 91% of our emissions. 99% of our emissions. Upstream, we can actually tell our vendors, onboard them on a platform. We've onboarded them on a platform called EcoVadis, where 80% of our supplies are looked upon, and then we make sure that they have an embodied carbon reduction, you know, play in place. So that 8% is taken care of. So what happens to the remaining 91%? Now that 91% is actually where we have said that we will partner with our customers and then help them reduce their, 1 gigaton by 2030. Now, coming back to your point, if you are asking us to reduce all the emissions by just trying to improve upon product efficiency, that's not going to happen. Now, products have become about 30% or 60% more efficient in terms, in certain product categories in the last 2 decades or so. So it's already at its threshold. So we have to do a lot of adjacent things to make sure that the IKW per TR that you mentioned of 0.25 or 0.5, I'm not committing a number, but to get there, there are a few other things that we are doing. As such, we are building, portfolio transformation. We are actually becoming more towards building electrification, digitization, and a bunch of that. So if you look at our net zero pathway, so we are saying, we're going to achieve about 45% of GHG reductions for our customers by us changing our portfolio from becoming building electrification and energy efficiency, about 35% by way of giving digitization and energy solutions, and refrigerants. Actually, refrigerants probably have the highest GWP. It's also part of embodied emissions. So that's going to contribute about 15%. and about 5% in the use of materials. I already spoke about supply chain management there. So just sticking on to the 0.25 IKW per tier challenge that you put up, we can actually achieve that not just through efficiency improvements on the product. We're going to offer a lot of adjacent solutions like, let's say, a series counterflow design, where we actually put chillers in parallel instead of putting, in series instead of putting them in parallel, we achieve about 15% efficiency improvement there. District cooling, we are offering cooling as a service, rental as a service, subscription models, and a bunch of other things. And then most importantly, digitization and AI. And I think, I'll get a chance to speak more about AI a little later on. But I think this is what is happening. And that the challenge of, 1,000, square feet per ton or 0.25 IKW per tier is all, there. It's going to be possible down the line.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. I think that's been really helpful. You painted a good picture of what's possible in cooling, and that there are certain limits that we should acknowledge. That's good to know. Philip, I'm going to come to you as sort of a continuation of the cooling dialogue, and so India is going to add. We heard earlier in this session about 1 air conditioner per second. So as we've been talking, there's probably been 120 air conditioners that have been added already. And you work for Tabreed, which is trying to consolidate all the cooling and take it away from the site to somewhere outside, so that you have better control over the cooling efficiencies, etc. So my question is really, on your end, where you're doing the cooling, where you're doing central cooling and being able to do it as a district cooling, what opportunities do you see to be able to reduce the cooling side emissions by 4x? And I'm also going to extend that question for you in terms of saying that because district cooling looks at doing cooling at scale, are you able to get efficiencies that are able to do larger market penetration and larger market transformation rather than just the efficiency improvement? So it's sort of a dual question for you.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's a pleasure to be here and honor to participate to this panel. It's been very interesting discussion the whole day. If you allow me, I will give you a bit of background because as someone mentioned earlier, I come from the energy world. So I spent 20 years of my career working for ENGIE, which is a French utility company. And I spent actually most of my career financing power plants projects. So don't hate me for this, because by that time it was the more, the bigger, the better. And then there's been kind of a shift of mindset towards, of course, renewable energy and energy efficient solution and energy solutions. So now ENGIE has built this pillar, which is the energy, what they call the energy solution. And this is when they decided to invest into Tabreed. Why? Because I think we are all aware that climate change, global warming is coming. I'm coming from Belgium, and believe me or not, even in Belgium we are facing heat waves now over the summer. So the need for district cooling is really increasing on a day-to-day basis. And this is why I think the future is also in the district cooling. I think our CEO mentioned recently that the best kilowatt hour is the kilowatt hour which is not produced, actually, which is not consumed. And this is why district cooling is part of the solution. So district cooling is, you ask about the 4 times, like, district cooling is an energy efficient solution. So it consumes 50% less energy than a conventional air conditioning system. And I'm based in Abu Dhabi, so where we have the headquarters. So in Abu Dhabi, if we were to change, I think it's 60 to 70% of the energy consumed is for cooling. So it's huge, massive in the UAE, and it's a relatively small country, if I might say, compared to India. If the UAE had to replace the conventional cooling by the district cooling, sorry, by conventional cooling, they would need to add 4 gigawatts of electricity. So I think that definitely district cooling is a technology which would play a role in this energy efficiency solution in the building in the future of new cities, etc. Now, I would say that it's one piece of the puzzle. Okay, so here yesterday I went to visit our first plant actually in India, which was quite impressive because it looks like a science fiction movie. You know, like you have this building very energy efficient. You have some wind turbines on the roof, you have some solar panels, and then you have the district cooling plant. You need a sizable site and you need a sizable project in order to implement district cooling. So I'm not saying that this is the only solution, but this is definitely a solution. And it comes, now to answer to the question, who will build the cat? I think everyone. I mean, if we just look at cooling on one hand and then energy on the other hand, or production on the other hand, and then building efficiency on the I don't think that we will make it. So it has to be a global effort, including the government and the regulation. So when we look at the UAE, so you have these huge projects, that's what you call proper district cooling, because they have this massive master plan. We have Yas Islands, Al Yada, for the one who have been to Abu Dhabi or Dubai. And this was somehow pushed by the government, because the real estate developer, it will look at this as a cost. It's true, energy, I think someone mentioned this earlier, energy efficiency comes at a cost. It's, for instance, the district cooling is more capex intensive than other type of cooling system. But if you look in the long run, so in the energy sector, for those who are familiar with, you have the levelized cost of electricity. If you look at the levelized cost of cooling, if you compare district cooling with traditional conventional cooling, in the long run, it will be more cost efficient. But again, I mean, no one can do this on its own, so it will be like a global effort from all sectors.
Well, thank you. It's glad to know that we are all involved with you on this. I think the couple of takeaways that I got, and I think you probably mentioned in the passing, is that when you looked at a district plant, it looks very high-tech, one. The second is that you've also seen some integration of renewables within the plant itself. And to me, that's something that is telling, because it means that when you start doing cooling centralized and it's at that scale, the kind of clean operations or high-tech operations that are possible, as well as being balanced by renewable energy, is something that you can take on at a plant level, which may not be feasible at a distributed scale. And of course, you said that this is a solution for some, but not for all projects and project sizes. Millie, you want to come in?
No, I just want to park a question, after everybody finishes. So specifically on district cooling and the application for which. So I was recently in an event in IIT Madras, so where I met a professor of IIT, I think IIIT Hyderabad or IIT, anyway, doesn't matter the name. They have deployed district cooling now. Now he's, according to him, because the operations are very distinct in a university campus, he feels that district cooling installations have been an inefficient choice. Their electricity bills have gone up several fold. So just wanted to park this question, from the experts, because for even a single person, he has to switch on a large, he has to keep the chill water running. There are not enough controls to, manage such small loads which may be happening on weekends or for some lab, etc. So how do you deal with those problems? So just
so I'm going to park that question, but thank you for bringing it up. If we get time, I'll get to you. I think the point that you made, Philippe, which I am taking, is that it's appropriate for certain types of situations. You might need a base load, etc., to keep it running. But I want to turn to Pratima over here, because we have a time limit. So Pratima, do you want to take the question of district cooling from your perspective related to the various projects and the sizes and the work that you've done, or do you want to take the earlier question, which is where do you see the biggest change in India as well as outside of India, where your experience has been, where we've been able to achieve 4x levels of efficiency?
Prasad, thank you for having me. I'll probably answer the first one briefly, if I may. I think EU is a good example in that way, and where EPBD, so the European Buildings Directive, where that is, Energy Performance Buildings Directive, where that is now, is requiring all member countries to set standards for nearly net zero energy buildings from 2021. And that's a journey that hasn't happened very quickly. They're here after 20 or 30 years or more of each country going through that process of scaling up skills, of scaling up supply chains, of influencing customer behaviors, of probably some of them first-hand experiencing some of the benefits of these buildings. And I think the technologies do exist. the technologies that that are being rolled out at the moment, and in especially in the context of new buildings, they have seen a proportionate decrease in costs as well. And when I say cost, it's more life cycle cost, so they are becoming more cost effective as well. But when we come to the Indian context, we'll have to go through our own journey that's rooted in whatever our circumstances are. But I think what we would all agree here, that change will have to be very, very condensed over time. Over, we don't have 20, 30 years to make that change happen. So it's going to be a lot more accelerated change for all the industry stakeholders. Possibly a lot of the technologies exist. Possibly a lot of them are being developed as of now, will become mature. But also we need time for all the rest of the ecosystem to come to pace with things, rather than wait for the perfect technology to come by.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the other part of the question, which is related to a specific technology or specific intervention that can get us to 4x, do you have one thing to say about that?
Well, I would say that there have been instances of a combination of technologies, and that combination as a whole is something that can get us to that sort of reduction. In certain circumstances, yes, certain technologies can, but as standalone mechanisms, their scalability might be limited.
Great. I mean, I think that the point that you're making, which you didn't quite verbalize, is that you need to integrate a bunch of technologies and to think about them appropriately to be able to get those levels of efficiency. And that's what we call the magic of integrated design when we're talking about buildings. That right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, building is different from like buying a product, right? It's or buying a car where.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Yeah. So in that sense, often, even if there is a technology solution to provide for a cooling or a heating needs, it needs to sit within that fabric, and there are people who use it, and there are installers who install it. So there has to be that ecosystem that exists to make it work. And equally, that building sits within an urban fabric. We can design buildings that are naturally ventilated and low energy, but we can't open our windows because it's too noisy or too polluted outside, then it doesn't mean anything. We're still going to put the AC on and keep the windows closed.
Sure. Great. I think this is a great segue to Anurag, because Anurag, you're a practitioner, you work on buildings, you also do capacity building programs, and you teach others on how to do this high performance level of building. So from your perspective, can you talk about specific examples of where either buildings or certain types of clients or building owners have been able to achieve really high levels of efficiency?
Thank you, Prasad, and thank you, EEEE, for the opportunity. I think I'll also add to the first question, which was related to district cooling. So we have worked with district heating facilities in South Korea. There we have worked almost like 10 projects. Out of 10, 2 projects where this facility was being used. And the way they select the project applying for EOI or applying for district heating, primarily governed by the local sanctioning authority or the municipality. So they might have in the vicinity almost like maybe 10 or 100 buildings, but maybe I think the EOI circulation or the requirement comes along with the sanctioning of the map. So you get to know how many of these buildings out of 100 will be opting for district heating facility. So that is the mechanism. They get to know that this is where they will have a maximum occupancy in terms of maximum utilization of the resources. So that is first thing. Second, as you mentioned, so we as an organization, we've been working in this area for buildings. So we worked for buildings for maybe I think close to 15 years so far. And then out of maybe I think 15 years, maybe initially so primarily focusing on the buildings. And then we started realizing that apart from building, there are other aspects surrounding the buildings or around the building. They are really important, because when we look at the buildings during the design and the construction stage, a lot of things they go into the building with respect to the energy efficiency, decarbonization. When we look at the operation of the building, there are a lot of things which become the part of the operation, which realistically, if you look at the carbon component, they become the part of that also. And then we look at maybe I think the MSME role, which manufactures some appliances. We look at the EV specific, and then we look at other specific, let's say discom component. And everything plays an important role. You rightly mentioned that building is not a very simple subject. And I think that is what the Pritima also mentioned. It's not the binary component. So we need to look at the holistic approach. And in most of the cases, when we look at the projects which we do in terms of green building certification, compliances, and all these things, even not only in India but outside India, most of the buildings, they start asking for the comfortable spaces in terms of the air conditioning, in terms of fresh air requirement, and all these things, which eventually helps in terms of maybe availing a good comfort environment for the user, but certainly it adds a lot of consumption component as well. How we look at, let's say the 4x component, as you mentioned, that maybe I think some of the specific projects, maybe I think we have done close to 1,000 plus project so far. And when we look at some of the specific project, let's say the government project, for example, we did one building for UPERC, Electricity Regulatory Commission. And this was the project when we got involved almost at the 50% of the stage of the project. Building was almost envisaged, planned. First floor of the building was already casted. And then they realized that the building has to be GRIHA 5-star, ECBC compliant, and all these things. So that is where you get to see the opportunity at the, maybe I think the different level. When we look at some of the projects, for example, Nalanda University, or maybe Leh Airport, in terms of these such projects, they certainly have been very phenomenal. They create some examples, but certainly I think there's a lot more, maybe I think the miles to go in terms of the component. When we look at the specific parameters which defines these things, maybe one of the parameter is maybe the local regulation. Local regulation doesn't know the energy efficiency, the authority I'm talking about. And then when we look at maybe the incentives, because this is where we see almost like 4x, 5x multiplier, where the developer actually look for the incentive and eventually get to do a lot of green buildings in different and diverse maybe geography of the country. And this is one area which is very, very important to look at. And third, maybe parameter that I see is the recognition, or I would say natural behavior in terms of asking for better building. And this is where I still see there's maybe I think it requires a lot of maybe impetus in terms of asking for more buildings. But maybe I think incentivization is one of the parameters that I see that has played very, very well so far.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I am noticing from what you said related to the UP project is that the opportunity for efficiency reduces if you take into account that you need to do efficiency midway through the project, or you've made some decisions along the way. And also the way you stated that if the incentives are in place, or if the regulatory agencies are aware, then that in itself creates an expectation of the project in terms of what it's supposed to deliver right at the beginning. And that can change the way, the level of efficiency that is being achieved, right? Oh, okay. Cool. So I want to get to the sort of the next level of discussion here, which is, and try to keep your answers a little bit short on this. This should be an easy one. We all have our pet peeves about why it doesn't work, and we know that in the building sector we've been doing energy efficiency and decarbonization at least at a regulatory level from 2007, and here we are still talking about the same thing. So what's your pet peeve on why we have not been able to achieve energy efficiency of 4x or 5x at the building, in the building sector? That and like Millie, you brought up embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is not even in the books yet. So we can't even begin to discuss why regulations and incentives haven't achieved that. So just in terms of operational carbon, operational energy, what are your pet peeves in terms of why we haven't been able to achieve it? Pratima, this time I'll start from you and we'll go this way.
Right. So in some ways, I think, I mean, we obviously think about, the policy being the big driver that enables it. But let's even think in the absence of it, what determines supply and demand? I mean, if there is demand for that sort of buildings, maybe the supply will follow. And where is the demand going to come from? If the future buyers and the tenants can really appreciate what benefits, what it brings to them, what is the cost of the assets, the operating costs of the assets that will end up owning, what are the risks they're carrying, and this information is not transparent. So there is, not only are there the lack of minimum energy performance levels being set as part of building codes nationally. I do appreciate that some states have, some don't, and different levels of adoption. But we don't have that sort of information available to the decision makers to make an informed choice. So the demand is subdued, and in the lack of that, the supply is also not responding to it. So I think that's where the gap is. It needs to happen from both ends. The policy and the demand push should come, and possibly having more transparency on what it's going to cost me when I own the building, transparency and assurance of, the quality or some sort of verification that comes with it.
Okay. So your thing is demand and the fact that there is no recognition of the value of this, which is why the general market isn't responding to it.
Yeah, I think there is a recognition, but it's sort of academic because
Sure, understood. It doesn't go into the business
consumer
practice.
doesn't really appreciate it
Sure,
because they don't have the information. I buy flat A or B, I have no clue what it's going to cost me to run it, and am I really spending a lot of money over the time
Right,
I'm going
right.
to own that asset?
Philippe, you've got an international variety of experiences on this. What's your thought on why energy efficiency
I think
doesn't scale
this
up?
is a very good point. I think transparency, collaboration, and I just want to come back to your example because this is a very good example of why it doesn't work sometimes. And I'm not going to spend too much time on district cooling, but we have a lot of experience where some projects were oversized because of a lack of discussion and transparency between the different, players. And so we had not a lot of examples where we end up with a power a plant which is too big, hence it's not suitable for the demand, etc. So I think it's transparency, collaboration, and indeed everyone has to follow the same objective. Otherwise, I think we will miss the target.
Sure. I think Pratima is talking about different kind of transparency. Yours is a different kind of transparency where you're saying that when you're talking of a project that is being delivered, we better make sure that all the facts are in place and that we can design and perform accordingly, because otherwise you get either oversized or bad performing assets, and then that sort of steps gets us going backwards instead of forwards, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Millie?
Again here, I think we cannot generalize building sector in.
No, I want your pet peeve on why we are not achieving this.
Oh, why we are not achieving. So I'll focus maybe on the, the residential real estate sector. So we have the, the RECBC, which the government is trying to promote a lot. And we have something called RETV value. So whenever I go and talk about it to any developer, they said, yes, that's fine, we can do that, but then I need to have a fast construction. So I use, concrete shear wall, my one construction, that's faster, that's quicker, and that's where I am. So where does this, come into play? So like this, I can point out, I was in the Environment Clearance Committee for large construction projects, which was a mandate for several years. So there we have to follow the National Building Code for setting, say, the water requirement. So you cannot, actually legally, you cannot design a building or get an approval if you do not provide for maybe, 135, 150 LPCT. The NBC says that. And on the other hand, you are talking about low flow fixtures, so on and so forth. So, but then on the supply side, you are providing, so entire thing goes for a toss. Like this, there are innumerable examples. Talk about parking.
So my question is, what's your pet peeve on why it's happening?
Because there are conflicting requirements in codes. There is no unified code and standard. One code talks about one thing, the other would nullify that. So, and the builder will definitely find the easy route of the nullification, and
Sure.
also ask for the incentive for a green building.
Fantastic. Manjunath, yours?
Yeah, so I'll stick to the cooling part of it, obviously. So, I mean, I would say it's on the demand side. Now, most of what we come across right now is actually either aspirational. I mean, there's no mandate to kind of follow that. So, although we're capable of a lot of things, like for example, we can actually deploy a edge computing device in a plant room and try and deliver you that 0.25 EKWh that you asked. But then how many customers are going to come forward, because it's got its own autonomous capabilities. It probably will reset the living chill water temperature, it will increase or decrease the flow, it will turn on more cooling towers and pumps and all of that. So there are a few customers who will look at that and those autonomous decisions. Also, let's say, if you want to go and give somebody a ESPC, energy savings performance contract, or a carbon assurance plan, or for that matter, net zero management tools, there are fewer customers who come forward. I think that's been the limitation. But otherwise, there are quite a lot of things that we can offer, we can bring on the table. And those customers who are using it are really happy with it, and they've scaled it up.
So one level deeper question: why aren't those customers coming forward?
I think the mandate is not there. Basically, I mean, it's just aspirational. If we can achieve it, we can achieve it. It's basically because of global demand. Maybe there's a customer based a multinational company. Let's say they're doing it globally, so they want to do it in India. But an India-specific requirement that this has to be done. You need to achieve this efficiencies at the building level, at the plant room level. I don't think that kind of a guideline is still there. We broadly follow B ratings and and things around it, but I think something very specific, we still need to have some regulations there.
So regulatory issues are what you're seeing. Anurag, yours?
So I think, in my understanding, Prasad, maybe I think we have more than the required policies in this area, and every time we do something which may not be relevant to the sector, or to the people who are actually implementing the energy efficiency or decarbonization component. So that is maybe I think one thing. And if you have that policy, I think there has to be enough or more focus on the implementation or enforcement side. That is one thing which we have seen lacking throughout. Maybe I think when we started our organization, we thought that this may be creating maybe I think huge number of inflow of the buildings for us to work, but so far we could do only maybe just accounting 1,000 numbers. So I think there is a lot of potential, but we could not do it. Maybe I think one of the specific reasons. The second reason that I particularly see when we look at the market in general, maybe on the ground, maybe when we look at the material prospects or the equipment prospects or the whole supply chain component, then we look at maybe I think the people who actually are involved in doing these material supply, or people who actually decide what material or the equipment needs to go in the building, they actually look at the other side of the aspects also. For example, I'll give an example also. When I think Millie mentioned the RCC wall construction, I think the perspective that they feel that RCC wall construction is a maybe more strengthful construction. इसीलिए वो हमेशा मार्केटिंग में भी बोलते हैं कि आपका घर जो है वो लोहा की तरह बन जाएगा, है ना? So and that is something which works because people in general they understand such maybe scenarios. And second part in terms of let's say the steel, because cement and steel if you put together there is a lot of maybe carbon that goes into, and then in steel also maybe I think except two companies, Jindal and Tata, all the companies they manufacture recycled steel. But most of the cases, the owner or the structure engineer ask for the virgin steel just because they feel that it will bring more strength, which is in a way, if you look at all the structure and essays, it may or may not be required. It is not that you have to give the maybe 100% steel in each and everything for the building. So that is where we see that there has to be a good role of maybe I think putting the right thing across. Maybe I think people in general who are involved in the building construction, they should know what is the correct specific, and people should also correlate the energy efficiency with the financing, with their maybe I think the pain points. If we don't have any specific maybe replacement of RCC wall construction, what is there for us to offer?
Yeah.
The developer will in any case will go for the RCC wall construction to save the time, because for them the earlier the project gets finished, they'll hand it over and they'll make money.
Sure, sir. So I think what you're saying is that there are multiple dimensions to a project. Energy efficiency is one of them. And once again, I think what you are saying is echoing what everybody else has said, that demand nahi hai, whether it's policies or awareness or whatever. Unless we have demand, this is not going to go forward. And the couple of things that we heard is awareness and policies and regulations, etc. So now I'm going to pose the question to Millie, you, and to you, Anurag. You guys have been in this business and you've been operating in India, and you're doing on the ground work trying to implement all of this and get it done in various avatars that you had in the past. Itna hone ke baad, what gives you optimism to still stick around and continue to do this? Anurag, you want to take this? And then Millie, over to you.
Maybe I think we still are hopeful just because we see a great growth in the country, and this is something which makes us moving. We feel that where we are, we will also be 4x or 10x in maybe I think in next 4 or 5 years. So that is something which is aspirational, and that is important for all of us to look at the growth aspects. But the second point is certainly which is related to the hope. We understand that the building sector as a whole is a complex sector. People in general, they take more time. Maybe I think a generation, we already spent 15, 20 years in this area. So maybe I think now we see a lot of maybe I think inquisitive ears to understand what is carbon, what is this. People talk about a lot of things. So I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Millie.
I think, we are talking about a vast country, and I mean, personally, if you say, I'm an eternal optimist, and when I started my journey to where I am, I have seen the role of green building certification as a major driver for market transformation. You talk about so many, products that have come into the market because of this awareness. Take about low VOC paints, take about, high performance glass, take about so many things. High efficiency chillers, controls, demand-based ventilation. I mean, I can talk of innumerable things. So, and these industries are thriving because there is a market for it. And definitely there are sectors of people, who wouldn't adopt, but there are early adopters, and there are, good adopters also. And that's why we are sitting here and talking and discussing. So I do see that, that it's moving, but maybe not at the right pace, but still there is a lot of hope ahead.
Okay. So you're an eternal optimist. The glass is 7/8 full for you. That's fantastic. And you're seeing that the early adopters and the leaders are what keeps you hopeful in terms of the fact that there will be change happening.
Yeah.
I mean, market transformation theory says that if we had early adopters in the 2000s, by the time we're in the 2020s, we should have been at the entire market level. We should have sort of gone down the S curve already, but we haven't done that. And it's glad to see. Yeah, I'm glad that you are optimistic. I mean, you're a leader over here, and Anurag, you've been in this for a long time. It's good to see the optimism. I'm also, just for the sake of levity, we identified one villain in this whole belling the cat issue, which was Maivan and RCC shear wall construction, and we identified potentially one hero or a protagonist who could potentially be district cooling, right? Because there was a bunch of discussion around it. But that's just for levity. I think that overall the discussion has been that we need lots of different levers around it. Demand side is definitely, demand is what needs to be created, and regulations and awareness and all of these things are needed. So if there is a takeaway from this session, I would say that whoever's out there, it's fine to keep working on the supply side and making sure that we have the materials and the technology and the people who do it. But the demand is something that we certainly need to focus on, and unless we get there, decarbonization, especially with an accelerated pace, is going to be difficult for us. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the audience for a few questions. 2 questions? नहीं यार 2 से कैसे होगा? Okay, Akash, you want to start first?
Thanks. Thanks, Soumya. Very quickly, I just want to sort of get the panel's perspective on disclosure of energy performance, whether sort of mandatory or starting.
Akash, can I request you to ask the question to one specific person?
Sure.
Yeah.
Millie, ma'am, would you please respond to this? What is your sort of opinion on utilizing disclosure of energy performance as a lever to decarbonize the built environment? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's very, very critical. And if you see, even when we are talking, like we have a platform where there is a disclosure that is provision for, and even for the lead rating, we are thinking that in future we may introduce a way that projects that do not disclose their performance, they will lose the rating. So I think disclosure is very, very important, not only on the energy performance, on everything, on indoor air quality and all the other parameters, because unless you kind of see it, you cannot take actions. And we have seen also that once people start disclosing, they are also able to take actions. And disclosure is not only one unified figure which you get, on the holistic energy performance, but also, sub-metering and looking at, energy use in different systems, different seasons. It's very, very critical. And it's a core part of even the LEAD Zero program that we have is fully based on disclosed, energy performance.
Just a quick question, follow up on that. Why would USGBC not mandate disclosure of their energy and water performance for every building that is rated?
It is mandated, but people don't, give it, and we do not have a legal provision of taking back the rating. So it is there. It is like when you sign the contract, it's there, but there are very few projects who disclose it. But now we are contemplating that in the next version, probably we will put a year stamp to the rating.
Thank
if
you.
you don't
Thank
disclose.
Yeah, over there, RBS.
Thank you. Anurag, just you mentioned about the key role that incentives had played in transforming the market. So, of late, as you are aware, the ECBC code is also incorporating the sustainability aspect. So, how much do you feel once the benchmarks are getting raised, the green buildings incentives continue to play a role? Because the idea behind the incentive was to promote initial adopters and then make it a mass movement. So has that actually happened? And just a small question for Millie ma'am. Ma'am, with my experience, what I have seen is that new buildings are probably 90% of what gets certified, and existing buildings are the rest. But for deep retrofits and decarbonization to happen, probably the ratio should be 50-50 or whatever could it be. So from a certification point of view, like you said, certification body have transformed the market. So is there any plan to ensure more and more existing buildings, especially those which are 15, 20 years old or more, to adopt ratings and improve their performance? Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So you go first, Anurag.
Thank you for the question. I think when we look at the overall construction industry, I look at maybe organized versus unorganized market. When we look at the buildings which are going for ratings or compliances, they actually belong to organized market primarily, which is not more than 4 to 5%, which we talk about in terms of what we are building in India as of now. And then whatever we are I think building in under the organized market, maybe I think few percentage, not even the double-digit percentage, which is going in for such rating precisely. And I'll also give you one, maybe I think, specific interesting information. When we look at, maybe I think, the urban locations like Delhi, Mumbai, and other such maybe cities, where they use the rating systems as their maybe outreach and marketing tool. They make their user aware, they charge the premium. But when we look at the developers working in the second tier or third tier cities, like say Meerut, they don't disclose that the building is green certified. Just because this is the mechanism through which they make the additional maybe built up area. And that is where maybe I think it is not at that level where they can just curtail down the incentives. I feel that maybe I think some more specific maybe time frame that needs to be looked at, where the incentives should be made available, and also the people who are part of those building structure, they should also be aware. Maybe the authority should make them aware and informed that this building where they have bought and they have got the registry done, this building is maybe CBC compliant or green building certified building. And that is where I think they have to have that understanding that this is their property which is better than others, and they need to take care of this thing onward. So this is.
Thanks, Anurag. Millie, before you go, so if we are saying that incentives are still necessary for people to take this forward, that means that we are not yet ready for mandatory regulations of the ECSPC, right? Because that would basically take away the incentive because it's mandatory. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So when we look at the ECSBC, which is again the very enhanced version, we still need to evaluate what is the enforcement level of ECBC. If we are still struggling in terms of enforcing the mandatory code, we are not sure what will be the implementation percentage of ECSBC, which is maybe I think way more complex than what we have as of now. Rating systems are the market driven only. They actually put in a lot of effort to make the authorities aware and informed that this is how they can make the better buildings. And
Yeah.
But I will also, like
You
to
wanna respond to
respond.
that?
I'm not in favor of incentives. Like, can anybody in the room tell me why do you need an incentive? Cost of the building may be, one fraction of the cost of the land cost. And the green component, actually, if you do a whole life cycle analysis, it may be cheaper to make a greener building. So why? Firstly, you are kind of making the developer do a green building and providing an FAR incentive to construct more. So why do you need an incentive? So I'm completely against incentive. That's the first point. The second thing, sorry? What attraction? I mean, do you need to, we can get into an endless debate.
No, I'd
on
love to
this.
get into it right now.
What attraction? I mean, do you need an attraction to tell that your energy bill will be lower? Isn't that an attraction enough for a green building? So, so it has no base,
Can you just
incentive.
speak into the mic? Can you just speak into the mic, please?
And the person who is buying the flat, he doesn't get any incentive.
Can you introduce yourself and say, what's your background?
My name is Rajdeep. I'm from JUNL, Gujarat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ma'am, I think you said amount is just a fraction. I think fraction or amount is not a matter. Incentive is a matter. Just human psychology. कुछ मुझे मिलता है बस उस हिसाब से. इसको मिला तो मुझे another will try to get incentive. I believe that.
Okay, so we can debate, but since we have less time, I would like to respond to. We have suppose within the LEED framework, we have a lot of projects that existing buildings get certified, but what we have seen typically is, and to the point which Anurag mentioned, that people who construct the building, unless it is a owner occupied building that they have taken the initiative to construct and occupy, there is a deep disconnect between people who operate and people who design and kind of leave after the construction. Many times even the occupant doesn't know that they are occupying a green building, and they may not be even operating the systems in the right way to give them the right kind of energy performance or other performance parameters. So that we find in many projects. On the existing building, yes, we have equal number of projects that get certified. For deep retrofits, we have found that retrofits to the extent of system changes or adding kind of building automation to better to have better controls, etc., are easier to do. Deep retrofits in terms of envelope retrofits, etc., require huge amount of capital to move the existing people to other facilities, etc. So projects usually do not want to get that way, but there are smaller examples. And right now also we are building a program which is called Performance at Scale, where we are looking at bulk projects or large portfolio of projects so that we can make changes at a at a global and at a larger level.
Thanks, Millie. I think Pratima wants to add something to the incentive issue.
Thanks, Prasad. I'll be very quick and I'll say we want both. So we want the mandatory standards, and then the incentives are to go over and above that, ideally 4 times. 4x reduction.
Okay, sounds good. There was one last question over here.
Hi everyone, I'm Rishabh. My question is to Philip. I basically wanted to get his opinion on the district cooling opportunities and market in the Indian retrofit market, because the markets that we see in India as of now, they're very haphazard and unplanned developments right now. In Gift City and Pharma City like development, we can see district cooling happening. But in developments like Cyber City or right across the road, Nehru Place and all, do you see an opportunity of district cooling being integrated in the entire context?
So to be completely honest with you, I'm not the best place to discuss this because this is more like a technical engineering question. I would say, unfortunately, no. It's difficult. It's very challenging. This is why I'm saying that district cooling does not apply everywhere. I mean, if again, people don't know that, but for instance, in Paris, there is a district cooling system in place which has been built, I think, 40 years ago. And there was a project to do some retrofit in the center of the city, but you can imagine that just opening the Champs-Élysées to build a huge network and bring cool water to the building, it's just non-feasible. There are some retrofit projects in the world. There are some in the EU. I'm not sure about India, to be honest, but it can be, from what I know, it can be technically very challenging. So I would say that district cooling, as far as I know, applies more for new development, greenfield. There are some retrofit projects, but it's more challenging technically speaking.
Thank you.
So it will be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Manjuna, do you want to add something here?
I just want to quickly add a miniature version of the district cooling that is possible. Let's look at a cluster of buildings. If you want to kind of, let's say, pick 5 or 6 buildings, take one building and make it the central plant, have the chilled water flow across these 4 buildings, make the existing systems that are available there as redundant, and put the most energy efficient system in the building that you choose. Is a miniature version of district cooling that is possible. We've done it in a few locations. I think it's not exactly district cooling by definition, but something similar to Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I think we're going to close the session, and back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Thank you for this very insightful session, speakers and the panelists. I would like to now request Mr. Prasad to felicitate the panelists